Keep your table sounding like this with Cheerios Oat Crunch. It's breakfast bliss that the whole family can enjoy, with energy from whole grains to help keep you going, along with 4 unique flavors: cinnamon, berry, almond, and oats and honey. So next breakfast, remember, a little crunch goes a long way. Learn more and shop for Cheerios Oat Crunch at Cheerios.com. 24 grams to 30 grams whole grain per serving, at least 48 grams recommended daily.
The Waco History Podcast is sponsored by Brotherwell Brewery on historic Bridge Street in Waco.
Cross the Brazos and Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn. Cross the Brazos and Waco, I'm safe when I reach San Antonio.
All right, welcome back to the Waco History Podcast. I began talking to my next guest over a year ago, and he's been real active in circles locally since he came back to Waco. And it's James Derrick Ross. Derrick Ross is a descendant of the Wichita tribe, and I wanted to have Derrick on to talk a little bit about just tribal connections to Waco, and is not only the historical part of that, but as those have been reignited recently. And Derrick's been involved in a lot of that work, cool work that's going on right now. But I'd love to start, Derrick, if you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of your background.
So my name is Derrick Ross. My dad's name is James Ross. My first name is James also. And if you somehow search the 2014 Wichita Tribe Tribune article, you'll see my dad is James Bunny. It's his name, middle name, Bunny. I mean, it's not his middle name. It's a Wichita name. Kukisokits it's a Wichita word. The Wichita tribe is the Wichita and affiliated tribes: Waco, Tawakoni, Keechai. It's actually 4 tribes altogether, but we go by today the Wichita tribe, and there's a lot of history. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to all this, but I have a lot of notes and knowledge. But the Wichita tribe is today located in Anadarko, Oklahoma. That's where I was born. And I pretty much grew up in Gracemont, Anadarko, and then moved to Texas about halfway through my young life. And actually, I've been living in the Philippines for about 20 years, and a missionary in the Philippines. I speak Tagalog, the language of the Filipino people, and I really understand culture. And I think that's been so beneficial for my life, because understanding culture helps you understand the challenges that Wichita's, Waco's, Tawakoni, Keechai people experience. And actually, I'm in the Philippines because I desired to go there, so I have to submit to the culture there because everybody's, it's their culture. The opposite is true for my tribe, going back some years. They didn't have to go anywhere to experience culture shock, and they had to submit to a new culture that was tragic. So it's really become special. And I speak the language of the Waco people to some degree, and grew up in the culture. And my dad is very strong in my life, but my stepmother is Ponca. My dad's Wichita. My stepmother is Ponca. And her name is Barbara Warner, and she was the director of Indian Affairs for the state of Oklahoma for 20 of the 43 years that position existed. And so there was no way for me to escape. Look at that, and this is what this is. And, education all the time. As a little kid, you're trying to, play games and eat, candy or something, but it was no escaping culture and heritage, cultural education. So that's kind of my background.
Well, I want to hear about your kind of personal experience, but I'd like to go back a little bit. I mean, one thing that our community has not done a great job doing is talking about this place, and the people that it was connected to. And so if you can talk a little bit about that history as you've come to understand it, and perhaps that's from your own research, but perhaps through oral tradition that kind of came down to you.
Yeah, so maybe I should back up to just as a child. If you're a young person, and you're my age, today it's fading. There's about 7,000 languages in the world today, and linguists say that we're losing one language every week, and by 100 years from now, we'll have lost half of the 7,000 languages. We'll have lost half of the 7,000 languages 100 years from now. And so our language was dissipating, the Wichita language. So Wichita, Waco, Tawakoni are pretty much the same. They're Caddoan languages, and they're kind of the same. It's just very slightly different, Kichai is the other tribe that's within our tribe, and it might have been a little different. Excuse me, but when I was growing up as a kid, you're sitting around the house, and so nobody's really. My grandma and her sister, they're speaking Wichita together, or my grandmother and her cousins, they're speaking Wichita, but the little kids like me. So this is 1974. People are still speaking Wichita, the Waco, the language of the Waco Indians. Excuse me, and but around the house, if you're playing and you're into something that you shouldn't be into, then almost like the way anybody's parents would say, all of a sudden they turn on the discipline, Stephen J. Sloan or whatever your initial is, I don't know, but come over here, and so the discipline, when it comes out like that, if you're a Wichita kid, Waco, then they would say Hatto, so Hatto means stop that you're doing, don't do that, or something, Hatto. Or if you're just being silly, like if I'm telling some same stories all the time, but just to give an example, if you cut a watermelon, in half, and you carved out the inside, and if you're like a 10-year-old kid and you put it on your head, that would look silly. And so if you walked in the door with a watermelon on your head or something, just some goofy activity a child might do, then someone would say, "Uwa," or "Ka'es," those words, especially "Uwa," means something like, it has a meaning, so it would mean something like, "You're so silly," or "What are you doing?" or "Witska," "Witska." That means almost a similar thing. "Oh my gosh," or for goodness sakes, or something, "Witska." With the expression would be, there would be a feeling in there, "Witska," and so you're learning all those things as a little kid, but you're not thinking. So when people ask me about, like, this is an interview or whatever, but when people ask me about these things, it's not like, I went to a class or something. Yeah. It's just my life,
Yeah.
And so being Wichita is not something I want to be or tried to be, or it's just who I am. Mm-hmm. So it's not, I guess that really speaks to the oral part of your background and what you're doing. Yeah. But I will say, this week we took, Fiona Bond was zooming in. She had went with us in December, but we went to Anadarko, Oklahoma, with Charlie Horner, Carla Pendergraph, from both from the city of Waco, Charlie Walter and Trey Crumpton from Baylor University, to meet the president of the Wichita tribe. And so being there was a lot of fun for me because it's where I grew up. If you're a Wichita young person, the language is going on when you're young like that, and you're not real. I'm going to powwows, other people probably around here go to rodeos or something. We were going to powwows, and I was a part of the board for the Austin powwow here in Texas about 20 years ago. But those are the kind of things a young, Native American or American Indian or tribal person would be doing. My family, some people dance, some people bead, some people sing. Our language, we have a language. There are 3,600 people in the tribe today. In the 1820s, there's like 500 people off all four tribes. If you back up to 800 AD, probably it's hundreds of thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
Coronado in 1601 or 1541, I have it written down somewhere. They counted 160,000 Wichita people in one space, and so and also the Wichita tribe, Waco, Tawakoni, Keechai, we're indigenous. We're the only tribe really indigenous to this area,
Mm-hmm.
between south of Waco and all the way to Kansas City. So when people hear, it's funny because I'm thinking, really? When people hear Wichita Falls, Texas, or Wichita, Kansas, or Keechai Creek, or Lake Tawakoni near
Mm-hmm.
Dallas, not Dallas, but Tyler,
Mm-hmm.
and Waco, Texas. Yeah, people. I'm here in Waco, Texas for about a year, and I meet people at Home Depot or Walmart, and conversation, and people say, I'm like, I'm just wondering, so I'll ask people, do you know anything about Waco, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a native Waco, and I just, for me, it's, if you can just laugh with me, it's kind of funny because native Waco, and I'm like, well, not really.
Yeah.
But I'm a nice person. I'm not like a vigilante, but I met a guy recently, Bobby, had introduced me to somebody. And the man, first thing he said, I was like, "Are you from Waco?" He said, "Yeah, 4th generation, with pride, which is honorable, but that's still new, I mean, 800 A.D. and 4 generations. There's a big difference, I don't know where we're going, but I was going to say one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is not to be. I want to be an educator, and I'm really working with the city leaders and Baylor and everybody, in town to help educate people, and so this is not meant to be offensive, but one of the main things that I encounter almost every single time I mention to someone that I'm Wichita or Waco, and actually if the 4 tribes are Waco, Tawakoni, Keechai, or Wichita, and that's another story. People from the Wichita tribe today, nobody says I'm Tawakoni,
Mm-hmm.
really, but people would just say I'm Wichita for a couple of 150 years. So, but I am specifically from the Waco tribe, so I know that I'm Waco within the Wichita tribe. But so back to the language or encountering people will say, "Oh, you're a Waco Indian? Oh, it's not Waco, it's Waco," and that's the first thing that people say, which is incorrect. And so the way a person would say Waco, in 150 years ago, would be Waiko. So there's two I's. So and if you go to our website, wichitatribe.com, I think there's a cultural and then language, and you can find it. Actually, if you go to Wichita Tribe language app, we just uploaded an app to Google whatever, or Google Play or whatever it is, so you can learn to speak some words in our language, but you'll find Waco, it says Waco, and then you click on it and it says Waiko. So that would be the way. And I shared with Bobby and other city leaders, Carla Pendergraft from the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I would like to help you also and other people. The historical, Waco Historical, over by, what is it?
Historic Waco Foundation.
Next to In-N-Out Burgers.
Yeah, Historic Waco Foundation.
That's historic.
Mm-hmm.
In-N-Out Burgers is a historic landmark.
Yeah, it's kind of a California historical landmark.
But I'm meeting with that gentleman,
Eric Swanson.
On Thursday to talk about these things. And if we could somehow, if people would, if I could somehow gently help people kind of edit some of their, like on your site, it says Hawaiko or whatever, however you say that. But that would be a wonderful way to just help educate. And actually, I talked about this with the tribe this week on Friday after the Baylor and City of Waco people left, that maybe I could help do some editing in the historic Waco or Historical Society or McLennan County or Baylor city of Waco, anywhere that those things are kind of a little off, if I could help a little bit, it would be wonderful. Does that sound okay?
Yeah,
or,
that's
yeah.
great. I mean, I think that's extremely useful. I'm interested, Derek, just as you talked about that 10-year-old with half a watermelon on his head. As you kind of grew up, the tribal history that was imparted to you or that you learned, I'm kind of interested in knowing, what were the elements that, even as you think of it now, that were kind of foundational in you kind of understanding your own tribal history.
Yeah, so there are some people, I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. There's a new Martin Scorsese movie coming out called Killers of the Flower Moon about the Osage tribe, available at FabledBooks.com.
A product placement.
I had a meeting with Kimberly Batson, is that right?
Yeah.
So I got my book there and read it. It's a great book. But Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro in that movie, along with 4 Native women, tribal women, and one of the women is Kara Myers, and so we're trying to bring her here to Waco to Fabled Books. It's a thing that I'm trying to work out with Fabled Books, where we can bring a speaker and help do a variety of different kind of cultural education, and in the case of Kara, so she plays one of the key women in the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, and but she grew up in L.A., so she left Anadarko as a young person, very young, and basically grew up like a California girl to some degree, and so she's an actress in Hollywood, and so just getting to know her through calling and text, she doesn't really know our language and a lot of our culture, because where she grew up, kind of like a second generation Vietnamese or second generation Filipinos or other people who came to the U.S. They lose their language sometimes, and so I'm kind of coaching her a little bit, sharing with her some things, and so, but she could come and share in Waco. I think that would be fun for people in the community. Yeah, so growing up. What was your question?
I'm interested, as you learned kind of your own tribal history, how it was imparted to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said before, my stepmom was the director of Indian Affairs for the state of Oklahoma for 20 years, and so everybody's really pouring into me. If you're a kid, you're not really paying attention sometimes. It's like taking out the garbage. Like, oh man, it's all the way to the alley. It's so far. And so. So the kid mentality. So I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17, and so I was in the Marine Corps for some period of time. And when I came back to, I was stationed overseas. So when I came back to America, I actually lived with my grandmother, Laureen Ross, for about a year in Oklahoma, Lawton, Oklahoma. And during that time, I learned. I had an opportunity to proactively. There's a difference between just sitting around learning because it's in the air, and then proactively
like researching
asking. Yeah. So I just sat down with my grandma and I asked her the very first thing I learned. I learned a lot of stuff as a kid in church. The church that I went to is Rock Springs Indian Baptist Church. It was planted by a Creek Indian in 1874. So it's the First Baptist Church among Plains Indians, 146 years old church in Anadarko right now. But I learned a lot as a kid. But when I sat down with my grandma in 1987 or 88 or somewhere like that, I just started asking questions. And the first question that I asked was, how do you say, "I love you, Grandma"? And so my grandma kind of smiled, and she was shy. I guess that would be a funny thing to. That's like saying, "How do you say, you're so brilliant," or something, So she was kind of shy to respond, but and I was in the Marine Corps all over the world, so I've learned a little bit of many languages back then. But so when she said "Tatara Okash, I love you, Aka, Grandma," then I asked her again, And then I watched her mouth. I speak Tagalog today, so I learned a whole nother language over the last 20 years. But if you're learning a language, it's immersion is important, and asking, to be able to ask someone, Rosetta Stone and all these things that you can, those are helpful. But spending time with a person and watching the way tatara okash aka, the way their lips move, you can see the way their tongue is resting on their front of their teeth or whatever, So I just asked my grandma again and again, how do you say it again? She said, tatara okash aka. So then I was like, again, tatara okash aka. And then I would say it. And then in the beginning, you're kind of nervous, and so you don't know. I'm dumb. I'm going to say it wrong. So then I just kept asking her those questions, over and over again. And then I would say it, and she would say, I could just tell, that's not exactly right, And so, so then I had an opportunity to learn during that time, where it was my desire to learn, kind of like when your kids wake up to responsibility.
Yeah.
If you have kids. But so that's my my kind of story of learning. And then all my life it's just been valuable to me. So I've always learned, and my dad is a real big teacher, advocate of teaching me about our culture and those things. And then really the last year has exploded because now I'm the kind of go-to person in Waco. I mean, I don't even know how anybody could, even just standing around, I probably know more than the general person because I am, a Wichita, a Waco Indian, So, but the tribe is helping me a lot, and I'm communicating with the tribe about, presently I'm not an official representative of the tribe in Waco, but the president, Terry Parton, is my cousin, and it's a small tribe, and I'm probably related to everybody in the tribe. Literally everybody. So we're working towards doing some things that help Waco in a way, and maybe some business things that might help us in a way. I'm meeting with Jonathan Grant on Thursday morning at the Hunger Relief Farm to talk about food sovereignty and the tribe, maybe some kind of partnership and all those kind of things. These are just ideas. They're not, if somebody hears us and said, that's not true or whatever, it's just things that we would like to maybe work towards.
So, Derek, how did all that happen? Because that's not why you moved here. It's not like you moved here with that in mind. So can you talk a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah. Did you ever read the book by Malcolm Gladwell, Tipping Point?
No. I've read other books.
So he wrote a book called Tipping Point that has how to start an epidemic is kind of the theme of the book. And one of the characters in Things Exploding is somebody who's a maven is someone who's an expert in something that his field or whatever that is. A salesperson is one of those other people, and one of the people is a connector. And so a connector has lots of relationships, small relationships with many people. And so somehow I'm just naturally like that. In the Philippines, I know Manny Pacquiao. I know congressmen, senators, rock stars, PBA, Philippine Basketball Association, poor people, rich people, everybody in the Philippines. It's 120 million people. I know so many people, but it's a natural somehow thing. I'm kind of industrious anyway, but sometimes, actually, Bobby Horner's the one. He's the one reason. If you know Bobby, you might have known Bobby, but he's really the catalyst to all my problems. Now my schedule is so busy. I'm joking him all the time, but But these things kind of just happen organically a little bit. The Waco Tribune ran an article in September, right before I went to. The tribe asked me to represent the tribe at a Grapevine, the city of Grapevine, put up 10 statues of 10 Native American tribes in that met with President of the Texas Republic, Sam Houston, in 1843, the treaty at Bird's Fort. And so our tribe is limited in their going out because of COVID and all those kind of things. So the leadership from the tribe asked me if I would represent the tribe at this function. So it was 3 statues. There were 10 altogether, but 3 of the statues were Waco, Tawakoni, and Kichai. And so that's our tribe. And so I spoke at that event. And when that happened, the Tribune ran an article here. And then Bobby saw the article. And then from that, Bobby just introduced me to Byron Johnson, Charlie Walter, Carla Pendergraft, Fiona Bond. I had already met Fiona on another occasion, but just somehow those things had started clicking, and then it's my love, It's like it's not. I mean, somebody doesn't have to. It's not like pulling teeth or anything, I love my Wichita heritage and our language and our culture and our history, and so it's not a problem for me to want to tell people about those things, and then some other things happen. Actually, it just so happens probably America is ripe for these conversations in contrast to, even 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
The Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Department of the Interior, has Native American leadership. This is big news for Indian country, people who are Native American or tribes. Texas Christian University made a land acknowledgement of the Wichita tribe. University of Texas in Austin has me on a committee right now. They're making a land acknowledgement in Arlington. University of North Texas in Denton made a land acknowledgement. The city of Grapevine, Baylor's going that direction. So it's just ripe for these conversations, and so there's a lot of opportunity for education, cultural, language, heritage. So all this organic things that were happening gave me an opportunity to jump in, proactively, So I'm excited about that. It's actually pulling me away a little bit from my mission in the Philippines, so that's a major problem. I have a lot going on there, but I'm excited to tell people about our heritage, our Waco heritage, even this is something, I don't know where you want to go. I have a lot of history here. From 800 AD all the way to 1961, so that might take a while. But as an example, the Wichita, this is part of the history. When the Spanish came, if you were to go to Saudi Arabia and look at a mountain range or a people group, and then you might say, you might come up with your own name for that people group or that river or that, whatever that scenic point is. And so the Spanish gave us a name twice, I think, over the course of about 100 years. One group named us Quivera, and then another group actually named us Wichita, and then another group named us Espinosa or something. I forget what's that. I got it written down somewhere. But so today the word Wichita stuck for about 100 years or so. But if you were going to ask a person who's Wichita 200 years ago, then the person would say Kirikiris Tatsak. So we are Wichita, so Kirikiris is the Wichita part, Tatsak is the we are part. So you're kind of saying Wichita we are. So even those kind of things, I think that would be a great. I mean, those are great educational things for people to think about. Oh, wait a minute. So the Wichita people Wichita wasn't even their name. How did that happen? And so then you explain that. And so, and also back to the culture shock. I went to the Philippines with the IMB the first 2 years, and so I was a missionary. And I was in the Marine Corps, so I've been to Korea, Hong Kong, Japan, Thailand, Australia, Africa, the Philippines, Singapore, all over the world. I thought that because I had all that experience that I would never experience culture shock. But after being in Manila for about 18 months, and I'm a pretty tough person, but after about 18 months of frustration daily, it's overwhelming, and I was actually crying one day. I told my wife, I said, let's just leave. And so culture shock is so devastating, and so personally knowing that experience as a missionary, and actually I've been there 20 years now, so I speak the language. The culture shock's still happening all the time, but the difference is I know it's coming. I'm more understanding to the culture, and it's not a shock. I know it's gonna happen every day, and I can work through it. But for the Wichita people, the Waco, Tawakoni Kichai, our tribe who was here before, for those settlers coming in the early, late 1700s, early 1800s, and it's just really flowing, at that point, and then those settlers moving us around and all that, and the government doing all these things. It must have been devastating for those people in our tribe back then, because I know personally culture shock, and it's so hard. I mean, it's a weight that you can feel, because everything is our food, back to food, our food source and our livelihood, those things are taken away, and then we have to take a government assistance, so our diet is completely changed, completely changed in the location where we're living. So I can really feel that, because I have had that experience to some small degree as a missionary.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to go through some of the history that you've kind of collected of the tribe and talk a little bit about it. Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things is probably people aren't even aware of this, but we're probably one of the last tribes to have the opportunity to be compensated for land that was taken away. And so, like I said before, the Kansas City, Wichita, Kansas, Oklahoma City, Dallas, Fort Worth, Waco, and south of here, and then all the way over to Tyler, and all the way over to like Abilene. That's our land, And so we were in a court, federal court with the U.S. government through the probably 1960s and maybe 1970s strong, and by 1986 the federal government made a decision to compensate us, not for all that we were asking, even the geographic, where we were asking. I mean, we're saying it's obvious. You can go to the Galt site in Austin or wherever that is, and you can see actually I brought it. You can see the places where our tribe had grass houses. So we're building grass houses that look something like that. Your listeners can't see that, but there's a map that shows. The listeners can't see this.
Kind of the range of property.
All over Kansas. These are Wichita grass houses all over Oklahoma. So the whole of Oklahoma, North Texas, and southern Kansas was Wichita. We're living in those places. So I lost track of what I was going to say.
You were kind of walking through some of the history, but you were kind of establishing the range.
14 million acres. Yeah. So in 1986, I'm sorry, I lost train of thought. In 1986, the federal government made a decision to pay us for 14 million acres is what we got. And so, but the problem with the 14 million acres, it's Dallas, Texas, Oklahoma City. I mean, actually, Kerr-McGee and the oil companies, not even just the retail value, I mean, the real estate value of the land, but the oil-rich soil, all through Oklahoma, it's just incredible. So we were paid $1 per acre because they said the time that the land was taken away, the value of the land was $1 per acre. And so at that point we had 2,200 people in the tribe in the 80s, and someone said, one woman, Frances Wise is her name, she said, no, we shouldn't take the money. Everybody else in the tribe said, yes, take the money. And the attorneys said, if you don't take the money, this in this settlement, then you will never get anything. And so the leadership just made a decision to take the money. So we were paid $14 million, $1 per acre for 14 million acres. And then some of the money went to the tribal members. So I was 22, so I got $10,000, and then a portion of that money went to the tribe for investments and business, and we're kind of a thriving tribe today. We're a small tribe, but we're working on being successful. So yeah, and actually Dr. Wernicke, do you know him? He's from the Galt side. He spoke at the Indigenous Peoples Day at Baylor last November. And so he said, and if you're a Christian, there's also a Christian perspective. A lot of the things that I talk about when I speak about these things is really perspective. But if you look at from an archaeological perspective, excuse me, those people will say that the tribe, the Wichita people, were here maybe 15,000 years. Actually, I talked to him on the phone today. I remember he said 15,000 years this morning. He said 15 to 20,000 years, but from a biblical perspective, the earth is maybe not even that old, so it depends what your viewpoint is on those things. But I would say at least if Jesus is dying on the cross outside the city of Jerusalem, and our tribe is in this place living with a government system, order, families, structure, and so for a long time, and the Wichita tribe is actually one of the tribes that's a peacemaker, trade in between the French and other tribes, So we're a key part of society in this part of the United States, but Wichita Falls, Wichita, Kansas, Wichita Mountains, Lawton, Oklahoma, Lake Tawakoni, Waco, Texas, Keachai Creek, etc. I mentioned that before. Those are all landmarks that you can see that have something to do with Wichita. I met people before. I met a girl from Wichita Falls, and I said, are you from Wichita Falls? Yeah. Do you know anything about the origins? Or she's like, no. I'm like, it's a tribe of Indians. She's like, oh, really? And so I was like, wow, how do people? And actually, I was talking to someone earlier today. The education that we get in schools, in public schools, we homeschool our kids, but if you educate, if you just go to public school, you're not learning the complete history. There's a lot of blanks in all the history in the United States, and so probably people don't even know these things. But so around 800 AD, the Wichita village system emerges, and I was talking to Dr. Wernicke earlier today. That's one of the ways that archaeologists, because our tribe is building Wichita grass houses that basically it's 29 poles in a circle with 2 doors on either side, and an inner frame that's built on the inside. And so in order to build these grass houses, you have to have 29 holes in the ground. So if you look at this map, archaeologists can find those settlements, those villages, where it's obvious that there's a big circle with 29 holes. And, oh, this was a house here. So around 800 AD, you can find that system emerging. According to Spanish explorers, they first found our ancestors somewhere around north central Kansas, and it was a string of villages. There was 160,000 people in that one space, according to the reports from the Spanish. Around 1400, our Wichita ancestors traded with other tribes, glazed pottery, turquoise, shell beads, wood engraved pottery. And so, 800 to 1400, there's a thriving government and communities, and so
and kind of an intertribal network between patterns of trade and between tribes.
Yeah. And actually the Wichita tribe, the Waco tribe, the Tawakoni tribe, the Keachai tribe, these tribes have their own chief. Today, tribes like our tribe has a president. Some tribes, like the Seminole, the Muskogee Creek tribe in Oklahoma, has a principal chief. Some tribes have chairmen, but yeah, so during the course of that time, all those villages on the map you can see, and these governments, it's obvious that there's a growing, thriving civilization of people. And also, so if you're a Native American or you're from a tribe, for someone to say, we civilized these people, it's kind of silly because, these people are living here thousands of years, the settlers who are coming in, I used to like this show, Jeremiah Johnson. Did you ever see that long time ago?
Robert Redford.
That was so cool.
Yeah.
Those people are trying to learn. That's kind of a good movie. He's really trying to learn the ways. But these people are growing up generation after generation after generation, learning how to, our tribe is storing food under the ground, we know how to hunt bison in the good times and then save that food to be able to help other people, when it's tough times, So the problem is, that's why I'm really a great missionary, because I have that perspective, I'm not trying to make people American. I'm trying to bring another message that's about, not about my culture in America, but about, what's the message that I'm trying to share in the Philippines, So, but I know, have a really good grasp on that because I have that filter. But so yeah, by 1492, the whole of the United States is tribal people all over the United States. I have a friend in Gilbert, Arizona. He's a white guy and he speaks Navajo. He really immersed himself in the culture, but the Navajo people, the up in Oregon, the Klamath tribe, tribes all over the United States, and actually in Oklahoma, like I mentioned before, it's a Wichita land. So when the tribe with the most told story is the Trail of Tears, but every tribe, the Seminole and the Muskogee Creek, and all these other tribes were also, all those tribes were forced out of their
relocated,
land. And even I don't know how great history people are paying attention, but the Indian Removal Act, Indian Relocation, the Dawes Act, and all these things, are happening to the different tribes. So today there are 39 tribes in the state of Oklahoma, and it's really new people. Even like the man that I met, super nice guy, who said, I've been in Waco for 4 generations. Even those other tribes in Oklahoma, the Osage tribe, Killers of the Flower Moon, Osage are from some other place. They were moved. Actually, Cherokees had taken over the place, Pawhuska, where the Cherokees were, and then the Osage bought that land from the Cherokee tribe, but it was never theirs to buy in the first place. It was Indian. It was Wichita land. Yeah. So if you speak to Native Americans, different tribes, if somebody has knowledge of their tribe, if somebody's like, I'm a 132nd Cherokee, probably they don't have the feeling, the passion, the pain, and the knowledge. But if you talk to someone who really knows their tribe, you're going to hear words that are common, like genocide and forced removal. And so one of the things that's good about the First Americans Museum, FAM, in Oklahoma City, just opened in September, is it's not the Smithsonian. So the Smithsonian has historically been run by, people who were not necessarily, the leadership was never a native person until this year. And so Cynthia Chavez Lamar is now the director of that Native American Indian part of the Smithsonian. And her husband is Walter Lamar, and he's my uncle. And so it just so happens that I really think there's a plan for me being here, because my somehow heritage, connections, family, just so happens that it's just me somehow. So back to the whole of America, you'll hear, genocide, forced removal, when we look at the story that they're telling at the First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City, it's harsh.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the normal, Indian museum, with a headdress and some moccasins. They're telling stories, that are, if you are not native, it might be really easy to be offended,
Mm-hmm.
because it's very honest, very honest. And so, but I think it's if you really want to educate people, if there's a way, actually, I can do what I'm doing with anger. I mentioned in the Waco Tribune article, I could be a very angry person, but that probably wouldn't educate anybody if I was angry.
Yeah.
And I have relationships with other people who are Native American from other tribes or whatever tribe, and they might come across like that. But I want to be a diplomat. I want people to learn, and I know that there's a way to do that. So that's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
Coronado came in 1541. He encountered the Wichita tribe. By that time, he could see that they have a chief and a sub-chief somewhere around Lyons, Kansas, and so they counted 29 villages that went on for miles. Some of those villages had 200 houses. Coronado called the settlement Quivira. So that's the first place where we got some name. And in our tribe today, we have and we have to actually adopt some of these things because it's just time, But we have 5 companies at our tribe today. 2 of those companies, one is Anadarko Industries at NASA, and the other one is Wichita Government Services, or is that? We have 2 businesses at NASA today, and the Anadarko Industries has been there since 2003, and my dad was the founding chairman for the Industrial Development Commission at our tribe. So today and I had a meeting this week with the tribe to look at some partnerships in Waco. We're looking for business partners in Waco. Mm-hmm. So the name of our parent company for all 5 businesses is called Quivira.
Okay.
So it's the Coronado thing. So we can't escape some of these things. In 1601, I think 60 years from that, 1541, 60 years went by, and by 1601, no one had encountered Wichita people. In 1601, another delegation of people from Spain came to where we were, and they called us Etzanoa. So now again we're being, and now I'm in Waco, and people are still renaming us, but it's okay, But that's what education is for, So 1601, we got another name, so we're Quivira, then we're Etzanoa. So and this is a quote from the Juan de Onates expedition in 1601. He said, "We came to a settlement containing more than 1,200 houses, all established along the bank of another good-sized river. They were all around on the outside, covered with dry grass." That's our Wichita grass house. "We remained here for one day in this pleasant spot, surrounded on all sides by fields of maize and crops." From the account of Juan de Onates expedition 1601, and we're a thriving community of people. 1,200 houses. Recently, in somewhere, I think it's near Wichita, Kansas, they found a site that was home to, looks like about 4,000 people, and so I think maybe it's Wichita, Kansas, but. So we're there's evidence that we're here, for a long, long time. In the 1700s, successful. I'm just kind of jumping. There's a lot. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
But in the 1700s, we had a successful trade with the French Americans, Caddo and Comanches. The Wichita never traded with the Spanish, but the French Americans, Caddo and Comanches. And I told my son this morning, I was talking, I said, I guess we probably had to learn French. I'm assuming that the leadership in our tribe spoke French, kind of like in Burkina Faso and other places in the world, there are native populations of people who had to learn like a trade language, so probably they're speaking English and French because we're the ones who are the go-betweens between the Caddos, the Comanches, and the French. Our tribe is like that. So Spain didn't want any guns or ammunition for the Wichitas and wanted to control all of the trade during that time in the 1700s. Settlers are pouring into the region, and a number of conflicts are increasing. And I was in the Marine Corps, and I love the Marine Corps, and actually I'm a great missionary. I'm great at what I'm doing now because of the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps really made me who I am. But when I went to Byron Johnson is a great guy. He's with the Texas Ranger Museum, and I had several meetings with Byron and their education people over there, and I'm trying to help in some small ways. I don't want to take away from their mission to tell the story of Texas Rangers, but it's not really about taking away the story, but filling in the blanks and rewording the tension. And so if you have kids, like I have kids, and I have 5 kids, some more of my kids will come to me and they'll say, I won't say their names, but so-and-so did this and whatever, and I'm like, you're kidding me. I was like, now call the other child, come here, and so our other child would come over, and then they would start telling the story, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, there's 2 different stories. Yeah, it's all perspective. And so when you look at the story that the Texas Ranger Museum is telling, and I went through there a week before I met with Byron Johnson. I was the secret shopper. I kind of just went through to read whatever I could read. And everywhere that the word Indians is on anything over there, it's only a few places, but it's too much. It says hostile Indians. And so I was in the Marine Corps, and I served, in the Marine Corps. And if you do something great for your nation, if you're serving your nation in battle in defense of your nation, the United States gives you, medals of valor and badges of honor and, all kinds of ribbons for doing great things in defense of your nation, But whenever that story is being told here in Texas, we're hostile, and so maybe hero might be a better word if we're defending our nation, during that time. So it's really just perspective, I think that's the big thing on telling the story in Texas. And actually, after I went to the Grapevine thing, I was invited back to Grapevine, I think twice already, and the last time I went there, I met a guy I had already met before the first time, Derek Birdsall, and he's the great guy also. He's the director of the Sam Houston Museum in Huntsville, Texas, and so he's a super guy, and he has a story about Sam Houston, and Thomas Jefferson and Texas and all these things. And it was the Texas Independence Day. March 2nd, but the event in Grapevine was actually March 3rd or something like that. So he got up and shared his story. It's this story. It's actually 18 something or other, but he's sharing this narrative. And if you listen to that narrative, of Derek Birdsall and Sam Houston, or if you listen to the narrative at the Texas Ranger Museum, it's romantic, If you walk to the courtyard of the Texas Ranger Museum, you'll see a man, a statue, holding a device, kind of on something like this, under his arms, and it's George Erath, and that's the guy who platted or whatever surveyed. So when the romantic, Texan, I fall into that category to some degree, when a person comes and looks at that, it's kind of romantic, and there's an awe about it. Wow, this is when Waco became a place, But for Native Americans, you might have a different perspective. You might look at that instead of thinking about surveys, you might be thinking about stolen land, and so your viewpoint might be a little different, So I think that perspective is really important,
That's everything. Yeah.
In 1719, another explorer, Bernard de la Harpe, encountered the Wichita tribe near present-day Tulsa, and this began a relationship with our tribe and the French that became a successful trade with bison and firearms, and we became kind of the go-between between the French and other tribes. I thought this was interesting. This is all in our museum. So in Anadarko, Oklahoma, you can go to a historical center for the Wichita Tribe Historical Center, and my aunt is the director. She's the person who works there. But in 1739, the Wichitas exported to Europe 50,000 pelts, bison pelts, and within 5 years, that number of pelts doubled. So the Wichita tribe were the middlemen for trade between the tribes and the French, and so we're a great people, It's but if you just show up and you're from, the East Coast, and you kind of are making your way across the United States, and you encounter the land rush in Oklahoma, you want to. It's exciting to see when you look at Indians, you're thinking they're uneducated and maybe uncivilized. Your perspective might be a little clouded by your cultural perspective. But our tribe is thriving in business during that time. In the 1750s, that brought a lot of challenges to our tribe, sickness and disease, and in the course of, and actually I just don't know. It's like conspiracy theories and things like that. But for some Native Americans, their perspective about the bison were incredible numbers of bison across the United States, and some people have a viewpoint that that maybe the government took away that food source to control the cultural assimilation of the people, which is tragic if that's true.
At least contributed to it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So I just have notes here. In 1835, Texas won independence from Spain. They turned their efforts to remove all traces of Indian people in the area. Hostilities soon engulfed Texas, and so through the 1830s, there were a lot of challenges, And actually, it's even when I think about, I have to balance how I feel, because I'm still. I mean, I grew up in Oklahoma and I'm from Texas. Actually, we moved to Texas in 1976. That was the sesquicentennial, right? I remember fireworks were going off all over Texas, And so I love Texas, I grew up in Port Aransas, the beach and everything. So I'm kind of half Texan, I'm half from Oklahoma. That's an odd combination for some people. But actually, in the picture from the Baylor, we took the Baylor people up to, my dad had an OU shirt on, or OU ball cap, and someone said, I like the picture except for the OU ball. My dad went to OU. My dad was a Russian linguist for the U.S. Army, and we lived in Germany. So, and then he was a career civil service. He served the government for 28 years. But my dad's and also served our tribe. But yeah, through the bison and all those things, it brought a lot of challenges to our tribe. Texas won independence from Spain during that hostilities across Texas. The U.S. Congress, I'm kind of going, around here, but if people want to Google the Dawes Act, Indian Relocation Act, Thomas Jefferson is not a good president for Native Americans, because he created the tool through the law for the governments or government people or states to legally take the land from whoever those tribes were everywhere in the United States. And so that also brought problems for our tribe, because 39 tribes are in Oklahoma today, and that's our land. So if you look at where the tribe is today in Anadarko, it's a very small piece of land. we're ranging across Kansas City all the way to Waco,
Mm-hmm.
before. And so because Texas won their independence from Spain, we lost our independence,
Mm-hmm.
That's like the political conversations about going to other places in the Middle East and doing those things, It's hard to say whose place it is to be doing these things, I'm a Christian missionary, so I have to
Mm-hmm.
also balance really
Yeah.
well my understanding of forgiveness and humility and all those things, and I get that really well. In 1857, the U.S. Congress appropriated money to move the Waco, Tawakoni, and other tribes from the Brazos Reserve in Texas to Indian Territory in present-day Oklahoma. Let me just stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother, so my dad is 80 years old. I'm 57, so my dad is 80 years old. When my dad was born, the first language that he's probably hearing is Wichita, even though they're probably speaking English, basically. But around the house, they're just speaking Wichita. So I'm kind of, this sounds weird. Probably people are like, what? I'm probably to some degree, you might be able to say I'm a first generation English speaker. Not that my dad doesn't speak English, but if you want to get technical, his first language that he's hearing is Wichita, the language of the Waco people, Tatara Okash, I love you, His mother is telling him, I love you, Tatara Okash, I love you, And so so for some people, their knowledge of their Native American heritage is a distant, I think my grandmother's aunt, uncle said we were part, this or whatever, which is valid. But I really know, I mean, I didn't I did at one point start seeking out to know more about my culture and my heritage, but it was always there, and it's what is the fuel today on your program, I mean, it's a natural fuel. But but when my grandmother was born, so Oklahoma wasn't a state until a certain point in 1902 or whenever that was, and also probably people don't even know this. Black Americans got the right to vote years and years and years before the Native American tribes in America had the right to vote, because we weren't citizens of the United States. Are you familiar with that history? And so that is so terrible. As an adult, when I learned that, I was like, what? Oh my goodness. And actually my grandmother, when she was born, so I'm 57, when I got married in 1992, she was 82 or something like that when she died. So when she was born, she was not even a citizen of the United States, and she was a woman. That's another hurdle during that time. But so these Indian tribes are being pushed around, to present-day Oklahoma. They left on August 1st in 1859. 15 days later, the 1,430 people ended up 170 miles march on the Washita River near the mouth of Sugar Creek. Wichita proper and Keachai were at the Fort Arbuckle Indian Territory, which is, if you're familiar, when you go up 35, the Arbuckle Mountains are somewhere right there. So part of those,
just over the state line now. Yeah.
Part of those. Actually, have you heard of Falls Creek? Have you heard of that? Falls Creek is a camp. Anyway, it's right there. So the Wichita proper and the Keachai were in that place. The Waco and the Tawakoni were moved to somewhere in Anadarko, basically, and ultimately all of us ended up in the same place in Anadarko, Oklahoma, by 1859. So here's a quote in 1853. I kind of mixed it up there, but in 1853, this is the Tawakoni chief in 1843, maybe. The ground upon which you sit is my ground. The water which you have drank is my water, and you have been welcome. Not many times have the leaves come and gone since we lived near the white man in peace. They were weak and we were strong, but I did not want war. Soon the white people became strong. They killed my people, took away our lands, and blood was in our path. Ki Chai Ka Roke, Tawakani Chief, 1843. So I have so many quotes from people in our tribe that are just painful. Even, I mean, I read a lot of this before, but just rewriting it down. In the 1880s, new strategy. So for Native Americans, we're thinking that the federal government is trying to get us to assimilate. There's probably no way a sociologist or anybody could argue that wasn't happening. So they're trying to get us to assimilate because what we are is unfamiliar to them, and so there's probably some fear in that, and just very unfamiliar. And so the federal Indian policies relied on treaties, reservations, removals, and war to clear the way for white settlements and undermine the tribal governance. So for Native Americans, our story, our perspective is different than probably other people's perspective. And so my dad says it all the time that the reason that there's no more Wacos in Waco, Texas is because the earliest settlers wanted the land, And so probably that's true. And probably people can kind of argue about it, but at the end of the day, an intelligent person would have to land on probably that there's some truth to that,
Definitely.
But the U.S. government had a goal to destroy thousands of years of culture, including our language, which didn't happen. And actually, Bobby Horner asked me, because they have a beautiful tour, Waco Tours. Shout out to Waco Tours. Have you been up the river on the Brazos on their tour?
Yeah.
So it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And so one of the things that Bobby said, Kyle, the leadership of their company, asked if there was one thing, because they want to say something about Waco Indians on that tour. And so Bobby said, what is one thing that the Waco tribe or the Wichita tribe, what is one thing that you would like that if the tribe wanted to say one thing about the tribe, what would that one thing be? And so I didn't ask. I mean, I asked several people in my family and some people from the tribe, but I didn't ask anybody. I didn't tell everybody, hey, I'm asking everybody this one question. I just sent the question to about 7 people, and the one thing that came back was resilience. And so to that, we went from 420 people in 1820 or whatever that number was to 3,600 people, which is a very small number, that we have businesses at NASA, and we operate the Indian Health Services for the whole United States website today. So we need to be doing some more business, and I want to help the tribe create some businesses because I want to help young people in the tribe. Anadarko is a small town like any other small town in Texas or anywhere.
You need to create the opportunities there so they don't leave. Yeah.
So we're thinking about call centers and other things so that young people can have that income and life. In 1845, the United States admits Texas to the 28th state, and tribes living there fall under the U.S. federal Indian policy. And so there are so many Indian policies and so much terrible things going on in America during that time. It's just crazy. And actually, one of the things that a great thing that Byron Johnson said, not there was nothing. I don't have any ill feelings, if we can help them, But one of the things that he said was, when they started creating the stories at the Texas Ranger Museum, that they weren't really thinking, because there's nobody present, there's nobody like me, So it would be, you would have to have that person weigh in. Oh, that's a kind of a derogatory viewpoint of the people that I am, And so, but it's really great that he's open to having this conversation and maybe editing some of the ways that it's describing that tension. It's still there and all that, but maybe filling in the blanks on that story. The Waco and the Tawakoni are living along the Brazos. The Wichita villages span 11 centuries across 3 states, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas until 1859. And then we were confined to a reservation near Anadarko, which is where I'm from. So the federal government created the first Wichita agency and opened in Fort Cobb, and the fort was poorly supplied. And then the Civil War broke out, which is another thing. It's just we couldn't even be given a reservation because now the Civil War is going on. Union forces abandoned the fort in Fort Cobb. Conditions worsened. I noted here welfare and relocation. That if people look at Indians during that time, they might say some derogatory things like they're disheveled, they're poorly, they don't, they're not well dressed, and they're just asking for handouts. These people were thriving, in a different world prior to Coronado, and so welfare is actually, this is a kind of a topic that's in the politics today, but welfare is a challenge for some cultures, and so it's just it was brought on us, so there was a limited amount of things that we could do. By 1862, the Fort Cobb agency was attacked and burned, and the Wichita quickly gathered what they could and trekked 300 miles north to Kansas in 32 days. I did the math; it's 10 miles a day, so that's a large group of people moving, and so the government is moving us around. This is families. I got on an airplane 5 times to come from the Philippines to America. I have 5 kids. When I went to the Philippines, the kids were 5 months old. We had a baby, 2, 4, and 6. That was 2003. It's a lot of work for a family to get on a plane and travel across the world, through airports and all that. Imagine how difficult that is for 500 people to travel to somewhere, Kansas, 12 miles a day, 10 miles a day. For a month, every day you're traveling that far.
That's grueling.
I just have some notes here that in 1866, a new Wichita agency in Kansas went from lodge to lodge and found terrible conditions for the 392 Wichita. This is 1866. 392 Wichita, 155 Waco, 151 Tawakoni, 362 Caddo, 520 absentee Shawnees, 114 Delaware, 70 Creeks and Cherokee, and 144 Keechai. They were poorly fed, almost naked, and many seriously ill. And if you look at these numbers, 392 Wichita, 155 Waco, 151 Tawakoni, 144 Keechai. We were 160,000. There was 160,000 people at one point. And so, back to resilience, I asked all these people in my family in Anadarko and different Oklahoma City, Norman, what's one word? And resilience was the word. In 1872. Commencing at the Wichita River, the Wichita Reservation was established and communal villages end. So the first thing that the American government was trying to do was we had an Indian, Riverside Indian School in Anadarko, and the government was trying to cut the hair of the kids. You couldn't speak your language. My grandmother was going to go to that school. Her mother, who barely spoke English, when she found out you can't speak Wichita in the school, they don't want any of the kids speaking Wichita, she pulled her out of school. So my grandmother never went to school. My dad's mom, Laureen Ross, and so they're trying to take away culture. They were sending Indians from Anadarko to Pennsylvania to another Indian school to remove them from the care of their parents, and cut their hair and take away their language. And actually, if you meet second generation Filipino and second generation Vietnamese, I have some friends from a church in Houston, and I have lots of friends who are Filipino in California. second generation Filipinos don't really speak their language because, I meet people and I say, "Taga saan ka? Taga dito, where are you from? Are you from here, And they're like, "Oh, I don't speak Tagalog, they're young people, youth, Filipino youth, because sometimes assimilation,
Yeah.
So when assimilation didn't work, the tribes were living in communities in Anadarko, so everybody was actually in a grass house for a long period of time. But then as those things dissipated, they still lived in communities. So then the federal government had some other ideas. Okay, so it looks like it's a gift or a positive thing. So the federal government, during the land rush in Oklahoma, they basically took all the land, and the description of why are we doing this is, well, you have too much land, and there's all these people who need land, and so what we're going to do is we're going to give you an allotment of 300 acres, 150 acres, which our family received, something like that. We're going to give you this land, but they also divided up these people. So I think it was a sociological strategy to not, if it doesn't happen, to help these people assimilate by taking away their language and taking away their culture, then we'll separate them from their communities that they live in, So
And it's also trying to hardwire that private property notion, which was not a tribal. Was not strictly a tribal notion.
Yeah, and James Henry Pepper, he's the CEO of the First Americans Museum, and if anybody wants to go up there, Shoshana Wasserman is a friend of mine from way back. My family is really connected, and so we took everybody up to the First Americans Museum. But James Pepper Henry said the challenge is that the European mindset coming into America, is people own land, and so James Pepper Henry said the land owns us, so the land owns us, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. That's a different way, the land, is what provides for us, and the land is where we find our water, and the land is where we get our food, and the land is where the animals, graze, and so we belong to the land, So we had so our communal villages are ending around 1872. So 1972, I'm like 8 years old or something, so you can see what's going on in America. So my dad's name is James Bunny. They call him Bunny. Gukis, it's his Wichita name. And so his mother is Laureen Ross, and then her mother's name is Ruby Hendricks, and then her mother's name is Wacoans. And so at the generation of Ruby Hendricks, the parents of my grandmother, they're not speaking English, and so it's just that close. And so that's this time, when Wacoans is being born, in I think it's 1878. So communal villages are ending. We live in we have an allotment in Gracemont, and then Fort Cobb, I think. So it is believed that the allotments were a secondary attack on culture because assimilation failed. So in 1880, the Wichita tribe created a thing called Camp Creek, which actually was trying to revisit the communal thing. So I was just in Oklahoma on Monday through Friday, and we met with the Baylor people and the president of our tribe. And then we went over, we're going to, Baylor is about to commission my uncle Gerald Miller to build a grass house in the Baylor Museum. There's something in there, but it's not traditional. It's a fiber and steel or something or other. But so he builds these grass houses, and so there's one at our historical center. So Camp Creek was trying to revisit that communal gathering thing that our tribe is doing. And so when we were leaving on Friday, going over, so you leave Anadarko, go north, my dad pointed out, and I really never even knew where this was located, but as you're coming down the hill, you can see Gracemont in front of you. And he said, that's Camp Creek right there. there's nothing there anymore, but that's where it was. And so I thought that was kind of cool. We were going to look at, so a Wichita grass house has 29 poles. They're cedar poles, and then the inner frame is willow, but there's a forest. It's a Wichita land somewhere over the hill from Anadarko, and so we went to look at these poles. But on the way, my dad said that's Camp Creek, and so the history. So if someone was just to Google Wichita tribe, Camp Creek, they would see some stories about these things. In 1883, this is also an incredible history that's hard to even believe. The Court of Indian Offenses. So if someone wants to Google the Court of Indian Offenses, in 1883, a body of legislation in the United States stated that, along with other legislation, restricted the religious and cultural ceremonies of Native American tribes for the purpose of cultural assimilation. Google, the guy's name is Henry M. Tiller. And Henry wasn't really against everything Native American. He was just against the religious practices, and cultural ceremonies. But it's interesting because if you're not a Spanish speaker and you hear people speaking Spanish and you're Anglo, usually people feel a little nervous because you're like, what are they talking about? And so it's probably a normal thing for people to feel like an outsider. And so if you were in 1874, so 1874, we're right about here somewhere, there's a slave shared the gospel with this is a Christian thing, but a slave shared the gospel with a Creek Indian. The guy's name is John McIntosh, somewhere living around Tulsa area. So that man at 40 years old became a missionary to the Wichita tribe and planted a Christian church in Anadarko, Oklahoma. And so that's 1874. So by 1974, I'm a young person in that church. And so if you Google Frank Miller or my uncle Gerald Miller, who's the one who's the Baylor's going to commission to build the grass house at Baylor, the first thing he's going to do is build a small 4x8 sheet village. It's a miniature village, and that will be soon, maybe a couple of months from now. But if you 1874, the church is being planted, and so Gerald Miller, the uncle of my uncle, Frank Miller, the uncle of my Gerald Miller, my uncle, he was in church when I was a kid, and so at the back of the church, so I'm going to have to sing this. At the back of the church, so when my dad was a kid, they're preaching in Wichita, the Waco, the language of the Waco people. My dad is in church. It's a Baptist church. They're preaching in Waco, in the Wichita language, and they're singing songs, hymns in our language. So by the time I got, was born in 64, so it's like 74, I'm 10 years old, there's a man at the back of the church. His name is Frank Miller, and so, can I hit this?
Yeah.
So he had a rubber cane. So he had a cane with a rubber stopper on the end. So he would start pounding like a bead out, and then he would start singing. And so typically for Indian tribes, in our tribe anyway, one person begins singing, and the first kind of stanza, and then after that first stanza, other people join in and they sing whatever that song is. So this is about cultural assimilation, because the problem is people don't know what are these people talking about, So as an example, in church, this is kind of maybe discoverable, but probably there's a lot of songs that people didn't know what they were, and so. But as an example, Ni wa sta wa wadi tsoka na ta ya se hi ho wakwi shi na git skadi adaho dante ikya. So that sounds like the melody of Amazing Grace. So, but there are many songs, Wichita songs, that maybe don't have a familiar melody. So if there were some outsiders in 1866 who were out to get these people to assimilate, and they heard somebody saying "Tataroka shaka," "Niwa sta wa wa ritsoka," they're singing these songs. They would be that would be an offense. The Indian offenses, the Court of Indian Offenses, you would be breaking a law to sing a Baptist hymn in your language, But people are so afraid of something that they don't know that they were trying to stamp out. Which that makes me when I went to the Philippines, I made an intentional effort to. It was such a task to learn how to speak Tagalog. It's taken 20 years, and I'm still learning, But if people aren't willing to learn the culture, Hispanic culture, Vietnamese culture, Filipino culture, Wichita culture, then that's a sad world to live in, But if you can speak a language, as an example, Tagalog, in the Philippines, gayon na lamang, in this way, ang pag-ibig ng Diyos, the love of God, na ibinigay niya, He gave kanyang bugtong na anak, His one and only Son, upang sinuman, so that whoever sumampalataya sa Kanya, believeth in Him, ay hindi mapahamak, would not perish, kundi, but magkaroon ng buhay, have life, walang hanggang, eternal. So that's John 3:16. So if I go to the Philippines and I want to make everybody American, and not communicate, what the Bible teaches, probably not going to get very far.
No.
But if I have that cultural perspective, and I think if the European settlers who are moving across America had the mindset of the missionary mindset that I have today, somehow it wasn't happening. The church in America was kind of growing in their knowledge of how to communicate those things, I think maybe there would have been more success and more culture that would exist today. There's a Netflix special called Gathering, if anybody wants to watch that. It's the opening clip in the documentary is a woman, and she's teaching a young girl. The woman's like 50-something, and the little girl is like 12, and she's teaching her something from their heritage, and she's also narrating. It's a voiceover, and so you're watching this woman teaching this little girl something, and then the woman is a voiceover on the recording, and she says it's not her fault that she doesn't know her language. It almost made me cry because I speak Tagalog, but my ability to speak Wichita to someone is gone. It's really gone. It's limited. We have an app. If you go to Wichita Tribe language app, you can see our language app, but the words are limited to Wiu, Gitsia, cat and dog, Gahits is salt, Hikwats is tomato. I learned all these things as a kid growing up, but there's not really someone to speak fluently with. So the Court of Indian Offenses, a body of legislation to take away culture. That's so terrible, That's 1883. In 1901, George Dorsey lived with the Wichita tribe 3 years. So there's a book by George A. Dorsey, and the title of the book is Mythology of the Wichita, and it's a great book because this man, again, like me, I'm a missionary in the Philippines for 20 years. My mom died in 2020. My wife's father died on Tuesday last week. We didn't get to see our parents in 20 years, really. And so we made a huge sacrifice for other people. George Dorsey did that in 1901. He lived with the Wichita tribe for 3 years and recorded the voices of all these older people in our tribe, and ask a lot of questions, and when you genuinely are concerned about the culture of a people, it takes a lot of humility and it takes a lot of sacrifice, that time is, forced relocation and all that. In the 1920s, the Wichita Nation Association to pursue payment. So we created a Wichita Nation Association to pursue payment for the land after our forced relocation. And then then by 1961, we created the Wichita and affiliated tribes on May 8th of that year. And so it's just, there's so much more, but
what has it been like, Derek, when you think of kind of reconnecting, a very place-based people? I mean, your tribal heritage place was really important to start to kind of make connections again between this place and your people. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like?
Yeah, I think historically, I'm starting to think back to, if anybody's a fan of Malcolm Gladwell, he's a great What the Dog Saw and all his books. He's really a sociologist. Probably he loves information. I'm kind of like that. My daughter read the book and she's like, "This is so boring," but I love sociology and the way people think and all those kind of things. Maybe that makes me a great missionary. But our tribe historically were middlemen and peacemakers and linguists, and we never really. We weren't really by nature hostile. We were really peacemakers and negotiators. And my dad's been telling me that for a long time. And I think maybe that's my purpose. I'm trying not to, I have a major calling to the Philippines, Filipino people. So to even consider leaving that, it's painful, it's painful. I went up to a kid in 2003 sitting on a campus, a curb at a university campus, and started talking to him. His name is Abe. Actually, there were 4 kids, but I built a relationship with these kids. I was in the young man's wedding. I was at the birth of his child. We made a big sacrifice to be there. So to think, I'm gonna not go to the Philippines anymore. That's painful.
Yeah.
But I'm smart enough to know that maybe there's a real purpose for me here, like the people in my tribe historically, to be a negotiator or a middle person, So I'm thinking really hard about those things. Taking this group of people from the city of Waco, I met briefly Bradley Ford and shared with him some things that we were doing. I met I had a small meeting with Seth Morris on the phone. He's the Chamber of Commerce Economic Development president. So, and I can say this, hopefully I can say this. So for Native American tribes, the difference between Hispanic people or black people or other people in the United States is we have treaties with the federal government. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Department of Interior has treaties that the U.S. government is obligated to, and there's probably a way out of it. The U.S. government can do lots of tricky things, but probably be very difficult for the U.S. government to distance themselves from Native American tribes. And there's about 573 Native American tribes in the United States. 39 are in Oklahoma, and but because we have all these treaties, there are opportunities for small businesses, Native American tribes, and it's called a 8A company. So if you Google Native American tribe 8A company, you'll see that there are advantages for a Native American tribe-owned business. 51% of the business has to be tribally owned. And for 9 years, as an example, if SpaceX is doing something down here and we were to create a company here in Waco, then we can kind of jump the line in regards to maybe if we have the capacity to meet the needs of the contract at SpaceX, as an example, or any kind of government, DOT, Department of Defense, anything, if we can create a company, we get 9 years to help that company grow. And so the advantage for us is we have revenue streams for the tribe. The advantage for the Waco businessman, someone who's native Wacoan, someone who has a business here, is maybe like I met a guy, a Vietnamese guy who has a company, cybersecurity, at the last 1,000 Friends, the thing that Bobby does.
Yeah.
And that guy said, I'd like to talk to you and your tribe about these things, So I want to get that word out there for business people, And that's the reason that I'm meeting with Jonathan Grant on Thursday, just to poke around and see what are the opportunities maybe. I mean, I might waste a bunch of time and find out there's nothing, and then I'll go back to the Philippines, But if there's something here that can, create revenue streams and help the tribe. One of the things is the Philippines is a call center, capital of the world. It's it used to be India, but now it's the Philippines. And so I have some partners at the Hope Center in Plano. It's a June hunt thing, and my partner is Art Hooker, is a businessman. So we're already thinking about a call center in the Philippines that's a revenue stream for the nonprofit that we have in the Philippines. And so I asked the tribe, Quivira, economic development, industrial development people, hey, is there a possibility, have the tribe ever been approached about doing a call center? And she said, actually, someone approached us last year, but it was more about the hardware and that. But we have a business opportunity. Our friends are in that industry. Art was in that industry for 10 years. He was one of the vice presidents for Citibank Global, setting up call centers. So I'm thinking maybe there's an opportunity. But I've been listening also to I went to every one of these 1,000 friends, and I'm not really a business person anymore. I was before. I'm kind of like Chip Gaines. We're restoring homes in Smithville, Texas. I worked for the Greater Austin Chamber of Commerce for about a year during that time. But just thinking about the businesses in Waco, what kind of things could we create in Waco that would help maybe provide jobs and then also a revenue stream? One of the big things in Waco is there's no housing, affordable housing. So if you make between $18,000 and $20,000 a year, and that's a struggle, you're renting a place, so hard to find, a place to rent anyway. Or you can't pay the taxes. I bought a house here. It was built in 1825. We were kind of fixing it up, and I just got my taxes, and so there's an increase.
Oh yeah.
And so for some people, that's a difficult. So, if we can find creative ways to help the community, through business or housing. One of the things is Bobby Horner asked me. So this is so when people look at tribes, we can go to Helen Marie Taylor has in the center of her museum. She passed away just a month ago or something. But in the center of the Helen Taylor Museum, have you been in there?
Mm-hmm.
There's a big area that's fully Wichita. It's our tribe, and actually there's some people on the walls that's in my family, But when you go over there and look at that, there's a lot of history there. I lost my train of thought again. So there's a lot of opportunities for the tribe here in Waco, and just trying to work out those things.
Well, it's been neat that you've been able to do as much. It's funny, since we visited a while back, I'll hear do you know Derek? No, Derek Ross? But it'll come at me from different directions, and so it's great that these opportunities have opened up, and the connections you're making with the tribe here locally. So
yeah, I want to. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So yeah, if you go to the Helen Taylor Museum, this is typically what people think when they think, oh yeah, the Indians Waco Indians, they're all dead and gone. Actually there was a Tribune article that someone, some other person, not it wasn't really the Tribune, but it was someone who was quoted misinformation, and so, people will think the Waco Indians, they're all gone, but we're not. We're still around, and we're thriving, and so that's what I want to do. I want to help create not just the help, with the education of the old history, but talk about what is the tribe doing today, and what's the future, because they're a great opportunity. Maybe I can give a shout out to Baylor. If we go through and get through all this process, it looks like maybe by the summer of next year, cedar trees are to be harvested in May and June. so that the bark can be peeled off. And so if we start building a grass house at the Baylor Mayborn Museum, that might be around May or June or July next summer. That's the goal. So if we get that far, there will be opportunities. So my Uncle Gerald is the one who's orchestrating this, and I spent a week up there to look at the construction and all those kind of things. The Baylor group and the City of Waco went up there with me, and Fiona Bond was on Zoom. But there might be opportunities for your listeners or other people to participate in the construction. I want to bring some people from the tribe down here, young people. I have some nephews that are like 18, and because it's kind of, some of that's labor, it's scaffolding and sweating, and so it's not actually my Uncle Gerald, he's 78, so he's not really going to be like doing a lot of the work, and I'm 57. I don't know how you are, but sometimes it's I'm kind of out of breath, but I'm in okay shape, but getting people who might want to volunteer next summer would be great. And then also, if we can bring people down here, I just don't know where this would be, but maybe if there are some people in the community who have some, not housing, but like Airbnb or places where we could house, it would have to be kind of for free. It would be like, this is my investment as a real estate person in Waco. I want to give my place, for 30 days so these people can be housed here from the tribe in Anadarko. So we're looking for, and also I think that I'm probably going to work on creating a nonprofit either for the tribe and officially be that here, or just create a nonprofit to work on these education things. And I want to talk to the city or individuals, philanthropic, kind of individuals, to see if we can find some land to. I think it would be great. I mean, I'm just saying, the Dr. Pepper. I'm a homeschooler, for 18 years. The Dr. Pepper Museum is a great place to go. That's cool. There's so much history. Waco Tours. I mean, wow. The river cruise is such a beautiful. It's like 7 p.m. Sun's going down. Bobby Horner's telling stories. It's so cool. But to have a center where we could communicate the culture of our tribe.
I'd love to have some Waco-owned land back in Waco, the Wichita-owned land back in Waco.
Yeah, and actually, I was on the board, part of the board for the Austin Powwow. Every year, the Austin Powwow brings in about 20,000 people to Austin, Texas. And so I'm connected with the new director. Actually, the time that I was there 20 years ago, he was just barely getting involved. Now he's the director. So they have some opportunities for like a half-day, one-day event where, like, when people see Native Americans dance, they're just thinking, oh, Indian dances, that's like a powwow, right? So it's kind of like your kids are involved in sport, and so there's a basketball, there's a 3-on-3, there's people who play soccer, for Native American kids, Indian tribes, there are different kinds of dances. So there's jingle dress, straight dance, fancy dance, traditional. There's lots of different kinds. And so there's a group with Austin Powwow that we can bring up here. Again, these things are my ideas. It takes money to do some of these things. So that's why we need people to donate, or once I get the nonprofit created. But we could bring these people up here and then give people an opportunity to experience the culture and the education, that they'll tell stories about, this is what this dance is, so we can bring these people up here. But my goal would be to long-term, and I shared this with the Austin Powwow people, if we could longer term have a powwow here in, I don't know if it would overnight bring 20,000 people, but it would give people an opportunity to learn culture and education like that. About 400 of those people who go to the Austin Powwow are vendors. So those are families. Those are native tribal people who they bead, or they make whatever their wares are, and so they get to sell that. But so it's an income for them, and they travel around the state, or they go to Oklahoma, or they go to different powwows to sell those things. So that would be a great way to help those Native Indian communities, people, families, So yeah, that's it. So how do you say Waco in our language?
Wiaco?
Waiko.
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 Waiko. You got to hit the E.
Yeah, Waiko. Yeah. So yeah, that's about it.
Well, Derek, I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, just the history you share, what's going on now, kind of your vision for what might be next. It's awesome to hear about it.
Cross the Brazos and Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn.
Thanks for listening to the Waco History Podcast. Like what you heard? Subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes so we can reach more listeners. You can find show notes and info on every episode at wacohistorypodcast.com and more info on Waco's past at wacohistory.org. Our theme music, used with permission, is Cross the Brazos at Waco, performed by the late Billy Walker. For more info on Billy's music, go to billywalker.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.